Hi, I'm Elisa Casas. The Golden Podcast is an extension of my Instagram presence where, as an accidental influencer, I talk about vintage jewelry and share personal stories about my life in New York City. Join me and my guests as we explore, with humor and honesty, timeless topics about the female experience. Dating, relationships, work-life balance, aging, personal growth, fashion, travel, culture, food, sustainability, and of course, jewelry. Hey everybody, welcome to Golden with Elisa Casas. I'm Elisa. I'm the owner of ChelseaGirlNYC.com, and I sell antique and vintage jewelry. I'm also part of the Instagram jewelry community, and you can go to chelseagirl.nyc or Tales from the Junk Pile to see what we have available. Today's podcast is something very close to my heart. I'm going to be talking about New York City, and I know a lot of my followers love when I post photos of New York City. Many of you lived here before and you miss it. Many of you have never been here and you're curious about it. Well, I'm a native New Yorker, and New York is not just where I live, it's who I am. And today I'm going to be talking to my friend Janet, who's also part of the Instagram jewelry community. I think you were actually on it before I was. And Janet Siroto is a very close friend of mine. We met 30 years ago when she was interviewing me for Vogue magazine. And when we got together, we saw that we were both pregnant. And we've been really close friends ever since. So here she is. Hi, Janet.
Hi.
How you doing?
It's great to be here. And I did not think I was showing when I met you. You had very good detective skills.
No, I think it came up in conversation. I was definitely showing.
You
so
were.
you must
You were
have.
a couple of months ahead.
So Janet is also part of the Instagram jewelry community. I think you were even on there before I was. And we're both jewelry lovers and have been collecting for many, many years. So I wanted to show you. I always like to wear something that's symbolic of the episode. And because today's episode is about New York City, I wore some things that I feel like they represent New York, at least to me. I have a pendant with the New York City skyline. I've always been obsessed with the skyline. And that's something we'll talk about because the skyline has changed in the past few years.
Definitely.
And we don't like it. But the old school New York City skyline with the Empire State Building as the tallest building in the world and the Chrysler Building, the most incredible Art Deco building in the world, has always been very dear to me. Also, I always say that New York is a difficult place. And when you leave your house, you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes great things happen. Sometimes bad things happen. And you never really know. So I like to think that when I put on my jewelry in the morning, I'm kind of putting on my armor. And one of the things that I like to wear are these rings with warriors on them. One of them is Athena, the warrior goddess, who's Greek, and I'm half Greek, so I really love Athena. And another two warriors. This is like a Wonder Woman style
Looks like
bracelet. It could be a weapon if I needed it to be a weapon.
Are any of these from the junk pile?
These are not. That's not true. Athena is from the junk pile. And another one that's from the junk pile is this Cartier. It's Cartier.
Oh, you lucked out. You got
nail
the nail
bracelet, like a badass nail bracelet. But did you see my bitch from the 1970s
you
bangle?
told me you were ordering that.
Yeah. And, when you live in New York, you have to be a little bit of a bitch. I don't know what to say. So that's what I'm wearing today. And can I ask you about your jewelry? Because you got the homework assignment correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I tried. I'm wearing the one thing that I bought that day I went to the junk pile with you.
Mhm.
It's a gold charm of the famous Plaza Hotel, which sadly, again, we hate change, is
Yeah,
no
we hate
longer a
change.
hotel. But apparently this was given to brides who got married at the Plaza Hotel, a gold charm with green enamel. And if you had a really big wedding, the top wasn't green enamel. It was emeralds.
Oh
So
my God.
those are
Really?
kicking around as well. Mhm.
So if you spent more money on the wedding, you got the fancier
you got
charm.
a better door prize.
I
And
mean, do they do that anywhere anymore? That they're giving you like a solid gold pendant as a, like,
We
souvenir?
have to get out more and find out. It's
Wow.
possible. Maybe
It's
we're
so
missing
cool.
out.
What I love about it is it's so detailed. It literally looks just like the Plaza Hotel,
Yeah.
like the little windows. It's
I
so
know.
great.
It's so nice and chunky. And then I have my favorite New York City token. I like
Mhm.
the big Y. There are small Ys, there are
Mhm.
other designs, but I've got a New York City token. And then I've got a World's Fair charm here where I was tiny. It was the 1964 World's Fair. And supposedly someone in a Mickey Mouse costume came over to me to greet me, and I was a toddler, and I
Mhm.
started crying
Of course you
hysterically,
did.
and my parents had to leave with me, and it's one of those family stories, so when I saw this charm of the World's Fair,
That's so
I
sweet.
thought I had to get it.
Well, I love the tokens, and I know you make
Yeah.
those. You actually take antique tokens or vintage tokens and then put the gold bezel.
Yes.
You put the gold bezel
I
around
think they're
them.
so
I
fun.
have one. I
Yeah,
bought one from you years and years
yeah.
ago. I love it.
They're really nice for people who've lived here or for people who just wanna feel like a New Yorker. They're a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
Well, it's very cool. I love how much
Mm,
jewelry can represent a place as much as it can represent like a person or an event or an experience.
yeah.
It's kind of cool. So I am, as you are, a native New Yorker. I was born at Astoria General Hospital. And the reason my family was in New York, it's actually a really interesting story and it has to do with jewelry. So I'm half Greek, and my great grandfather, who lived in Smyrna, Greece, which is now Turkey, but at the time it was Greece, he heard that the streets in the United States were paved with gold. And he was convinced that if he came here, he would be a rich man. So he left his wife and his two children in Greece. One of the two children was my grandfather, who you've met. And he came here and he struggled so terribly. And a year later, it was Christmas Eve. He was completely depressed because he hadn't made any money. He wasn't with his family. It was Christmas Eve and it was snowing and he was living on the Lower East Side and he was despondent. And while walking home, he saw something glistening in the snow and it was a diamond ring. And he sold it and it was just enough money to bring his family over from Greece.
Amazing.
And I mean, I get the chills when I think of that story because who knows what would have happened if he hadn't found that ring. And just the idea of like, who was this woman who lost the ring? And every time it snows, every time, every year on Christmas Eve, I always think about that and how this like moment of serendipity was so instrumental in the person I am today. Who knows who I would be if like this hadn't happened,
You
you
know what
know?
that's reminding me of, though? You lost a ring in New York
Oh,
City
yeah.
and went on a search for it that
Yeah.
lasted for several years.
Yeah. 2.5 years. That was a crazy story. I lost my ring at Rayo's and it was my favorite ring. It was my first rose cut diamond ring.
Mhm.
And I just had this feeling that I was going to see that ring again. And 2.5 years later, it popped up on eBay and it was the same ring. And it was a guy on 47th Street, a jeweler on 47th Street. And I went there and I just said, take pity on me. This is my ring. Please. Like, I don't care what it costs. And he was very sweet. He's like, stuff like this happens all the time here. And he sold it to me for very cheap. Yeah. So, yeah. So, that side of my Greek family came over and they had four more kids. And another kind of interesting story is they were Greek and they had a boat. They were like fishermen, like, old school. And when the polio epidemic hit New York, my great grandfather took all six kids and the wife, of course, the mom, on the boat. And they lived on the boat for I don't know how many months to keep everyone away from everyone else so they wouldn't get polio. And none of them got polio.
Wow, what year was that, and where
I'm
did
not
the
sure,
boat
but it must
go?
have been like late teens,
Mhm,
early 20s, something
mhm.
like that. The other side of my Greek family was from a town called Monovasia, which is on the Peloponnese, just about 3 hours south of Athens. And that was a very different story because they had money. So my great-grandfather came over, I think sold something in Greece to get the money to come over, and he had and raised his family here. So my grandmother was born at 530 East 18th Street in 1913, and actually, I am wearing a 1913 ring because that was the year she was born. And she was so proud to be a New Yorker. She was so proud to have been born here, native New Yorker. And she was really the one who instilled the love of New York in me. Because when I was a kid, I moved to Madrid for 4 years until my dad graduated from medical school. So I was about 5 years old when we came back to New York. And every weekend, she took me out. We would take the R train. I'm sorry, we would drive into Astoria with my grandfather. He would go to work. He was an optometrist. And we would grab the R train in Astoria and come into the city. And every weekend, she took me to a Broadway show, a museum, amazing restaurants. Do you remember Top of the Sixes?
Yes, I
That was
went
my
there
favorite
went there on my
restaurant.
birthday one year.
I always got the chef salad. It was like probably the first salad I ever ordered in a restaurant, but it had like ham and cheese and turkey, and it was like a hearty salad.
But things were so much more formal then. What I remember as a
Oh, yeah.
kid, going out to dinner, you'd have this team of waiters standing around you, 3
Mhm.
people with napkins draped over their arms waiting, and it's so different now. Now it's like, "Hey, I'm Joe, I'm your server today. How's it
Yeah.
going?" It's very different
No, it's
vibe.
very casual now. But yeah, she would take me to, to see a chorus line, Evita. I mean, that changed my whole life. It it was like she was so enthusiastic about New York. If there was anything new, like I remember when they did the Roosevelt Island
The
cable,
tram,
the
sure.
tram, she had to do it like the first week. And literally, it was the only time I ever went to Roosevelt Island. Like, I've lived here all my life. We took it to Roosevelt Island, we took it back, and that
But
was it.
you're totally like that because when they reopened the Frick, you're like, "I have tickets for opening
Yeah,
day. We have to
yeah,
go."
yeah.
But can I tell you something? That reminds me, my mom's parents came over from Budapest or outside of Budapest when they were teenagers. My mom has always said that the people of that generation who made it to New York were a special kind of adventurous,
Yeah.
curious person willing to get on a boat, go across an ocean, and see whether the streets were paved with gold, try to find a relative of theirs in the Bronx, Columbus, Ohio, wherever your people were from. And I think that generation just drank up culture and really explored this city and passed it on to us.
Yeah, and they never went back. Like, my great-grandfather, he came here. He never once went back to Greece. He opened a cafe in Greenwich Village. He sort of was a jack of all trades. He had a Greek newspaper that's still around
Wow.
in Astoria. He was a writer. I have a couple of his books. I can't read them because they're in Greek. But like he was the first person to serve yogurt in New York City at his cafe. It was Greek yogurt. It was a very big deal. And the cafe is still there. What is it called now? La Lanterna. Do you know it? It's on
I know
McDougal
that.
Street.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my grandfather's
I
cafe.
did not know this.
Yeah,
And you've had cafes.
that's right.
We come full
Yeah,
circle.
we come full circle. So yeah, so it's funny that they came here and that was it. They were Americans. They didn't want to speak Greek. I mean, there was food things, cultural things that seeped into my upbringing that, my grandmother cooked a lot of Greek food, but she couldn't speak Greek and she didn't really care about going back. But it's interesting because for us, for like my generation, we're all like dying to go back. And for my 50th birthday, we did this big trip back. I just organized this whole trip for my family. And we all went back to this town, Manavasia, together. And it was surreal. It really felt like spiritual. It felt like I can't explain it, but it just felt like I had this connection, which I did, but I felt it in my bones.
Didn't you stay in the actual house
Yes.
that belonged to your
Yep.
family?
Yeah. So my grandmother's maiden name was Stalakis, and the name of the hotel is the Stalakis House. and we were able to stay in the actual home of my family.
So cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so, my grandmother instilled this love of New York in me, and every weekend we went to the city, called it the city, which was Manhattan, of course. And I'll never forget, we always used to go to Midtown, and I will never forget when she took me to Greenwich Village for the first time. And she took me to see the Fantastics, which was the longest running show
Was there
ever,
forever.
and to Figaro, Cafe Figaro for lunch. And I had no idea that there was a place like Greenwich Village. Like, I was always in Midtown. That's where we went for dinners, and that's where my grandmother took me to Broadway and museums. And I just remember being maybe 8 years old or 7, 8 years old and thinking, "Oh my God, this is amazing. I'm going to live here one day." And that was it. I was like, this is where I am meant to be. And from then on, like when I was a little older and I started going to the city on my own with friends, that's where we always went. Like, we didn't want to be uptown. Uptown was for like old people. You know what I mean? Downtown was for young people.
You didn't even stop at Fiorucci on 59th
No, I
Street, though.
did. So yeah, every year the fall clothing shopping spree that I'm sure you did, everyone did. Bloomingdale's, Fiorucci, Capezio. Remember when Capezios were popular?
You needed the jazz flats.
Yeah.
Right?
And then Olaf Clogs
Yes, Olaf and
was also,
Daughters.
Olaf and Daughters was up there. So you get your clogs and your Capezios. So yeah, for certain things, even, I don't like to go uptown even today, but for certain things you have to. Like, you want to go to the Metropolitan Museum, you got to go uptown.
You make the sacrifice.
Yeah.
You cross 14th Street. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you had I went to school in Queens, and the weekends were our time. The weekends were like, that's it. We get in the car and spend Saturdays and Sundays walking around the village, shopping, Canal Jean, Unique Boutique, all those great stores that are no longer.
I know.
So sad.
Reminiscence.
There was a Capezio also on McDougal Street. But for me, I didn't feel like a real New Yorker until I went to NYU. That's when, living in Manhattan somehow felt like New York to me. It's not so much anymore, but you grew up on the Upper East Side. So you were on the island. You were always on the island.
But we gravitated to go downtown as well. All
Right.
of those stores you've mentioned, we would always spend our weekends bumming around Astor Place, St. Mark's Place, shopping at those stores, buying old Hawaiian shirts and baseball jerseys. And remember the trend for those men's tuxedo jackets?
Oh, hell yeah.
Dyed in all different colors.
Oh, I had a
Yeah.
red one, a white one, and a black one.
Yeah.
They were super oversized and you had to roll up the sleeves. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so much fun.
No, I loved the stores. They had, Unique Boutique had new things, but also vintage things, and also Army and Navy stuff, They just had such a great mix.
And so many record shops everywhere.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was really part of it. We were in the vinyl era.
Yeah.
So buying 45s, buying albums. And I was really into English music. So you'd have to go and try to find the import album, which was twice as much as an American-made record.
Second Coming Records. I used to go there all the time.
One called
I think they're still there.
99X. Do you remember
Yes,
that
I
one?
do.
That
Yes,
was
I
on
do.
McDougal.
Sounds
Yeah.
in the East Village.
Yeah, not so much antique jewelry, but I remember buying a lot of those enameled Indian jewelry on 8th Street, along with the shoes and the peasant tops and those dangly, jingly earrings.
Yeah.
That was the look.
Yeah, New York was a very different place back then. And we always say we hate change, But, a lot of things have changed for the better. New York was kind of a dangerous place. And it's funny because when I think back on my years at NYU in the 80s, which of course were the first years that I was living on my own in Manhattan, it just felt normal that everything was kind of dangerous and gritty and dirty and the subways were full of graffiti. It didn't feel dangerous. It just felt like normal. And
It
now
was our hometown. And it's so different. As a child and as a teenager, I can't tell you that. It's kind of sad, but I was flashed regularly. I had my bus pass stolen. I had my dollars to buy candy after school stolen. I was menaced and catcalled and all kinds of things. You probably remember this. It
Yeah,
was
of
the
course.
70s and 80s in New York City. And it's very different. I think the experience of young women growing up today is very, very different, a couple of generations later.
Yeah, but I mean, that's also one of the ways that the city has improved,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't go back to those days as much as the city was more interesting, it was maybe more diverse. It just felt like a more interesting place. Like even the boutiques and the shops, they were all mom and pop shops. There weren't any chains. There were so few chains, Bloomingdale's. You had like the big department stores, and then you had all these really cute little mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
So, like, of course, I miss that. I mean, you can still seek those places out, but they're fewer and farther
They're
between.
concentrated in certain neighborhoods, but don't you feel that businesses like yours have sort of taken the place of that? You have a
Yes.
very singular angle on what you're selling. And I've told you the story about this tiny little jewelry and watch repair store that I used to go to starting in fifth grade. I was 10 years old,
Mhm.
and I had a very wealthy best friend who always was just dripping money. And she would go after school most days to this tiny jewelry store. The little old man who owned it would bring out these velvet lined trays full of gold
What
charms.
I wouldn't do to do
I
that
have a lot
now.
of them on my charm bracelet, which now I'm regretting not having brought. And she would buy a lot of those charms. And of course, that store is long gone, can't afford the rents on Madison Avenue. But in some ways, what Instagram and other social media gives you is people can buy from you.
Yeah,
So I maybe it's my age or just my natural inclination. I prefer that brick and mortar, being able to go in and afford things and pick
yeah.
through things and have that tactile experience. But the world has really changed. And I like to calm myself down by saying there are plenty of new businesses, but they may not all be real places where we can
Right.
go.
No, and, when I opened my first store in 1993 in Soho, I mean, Soho was like burned out buildings. It literally still was in the early 90s, and it was all artists who were living there. And I will never forget, like, this is kind of how things happen in my life because I wasn't really planning on opening a store, but I was walking down Thompson Street and there was this empty storefront and there was a sign in the window and it said for rent by auction. And I thought, what does that mean? And there was a phone number. It was a building that was taken over by the city of New York from a landlord that didn't pay their real estate taxes. And this used to happen all the time.
Definitely.
So the city was trying to make some money off the building. They couldn't get rid of the residents because I think it was a rent controlled building. And it was so crazy. Like, we took an envelope and like put our highest bid in the envelope, sealed it and put it in a box. And then they opened all the envelopes and Ruby's dad and we had the highest bid, which was $1,526. And you would die. I still have the lease. It is
That's
one
great.
page long.
Yeah.
It's one page long. And it was a year-to-year lease. And all it said was, it renews every year. So I was there for 16 years before they sold the building
Hmm.
and I had to leave. But, how could I complain after 16 years of paying $1,526? I was like, okay, like
Yeah.
that's pretty good.
You can maybe get a parking place now for
Yeah,
that amount of
it's
money.
so crazy.
Yeah.
But that's how I started. And then the store next door was available and I opened the cafe. And then the store around the corner was available. And my landlord was actually Adam from the Beastie Boys and Kathleen Hanna from Bikini Kill,
Mhm.
which was just a crazy coincidence because I used to hang out with the Beastie Boys when I was in college. And, all of a sudden I had like 3 stores and a cafe. And then just one by one, it was like the neighborhood changed. I lost my leases and everything just kind of fell apart. And what I was going to say before is selling online is such a different experience because I have these customers who are regular customers who buy every week. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they look like. I don't know anything about them. I don't know their age. I used to know all my customers. And I would like get a piece and say like, oh, this is perfect for Carmel or whatever. And there was a completely different vibe, like I became friends with some of my customers.
Mhm.
Now everyone's just anonymous and it's really strange. And when people recognize me on the street, I'm always so happy because I love like m- the humanity of meeting someone.
And you have met friends through your
That
business.
is true.
You do have a couple
A
of
couple.
relatively new friends
Yeah.
who come from the fact that you're conversing with people, you're sharing stories. Even online, you get with some people, not with everyone, you get some of that connection about
Right.
their life story and how much a piece means to them, why they want it, which is always so interesting to hear,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So when I opened my first store, I was pregnant with Ruby. So that's around the time I met you.
And I met you about your mail order
Right. I had a
business,
mail
which
order
you
business
were doing as
before,
well.
and the store was kind of an expansion of that.
And your mail order business was very much rooted in antique, Victorian era, and slightly
Mhm.
later clothing that you were finding things at flea markets and having them remade so they
Reproduced.
weren't
Mhm.
falling apart and the seams weren't
Yeah,
unraveling.
you
I
remember. You have
remember, and
such a good memory.
you were really into Gothic jewelry. You had a
Yep.
lot of Victorian
Morning
morning
jewelry.
jewelry that I
Mhm.
really
I had
coveted.
a big phase of morning jewelry. I
Yes.
had a lot of it. I collected it. God, it was so cheap back then. It's so expensive now. But yeah, I opened my first store when I was pregnant. Like thinking back now, it seems insane. Like I don't know how I did everything. But, I always wanted to raise my daughter, a child, in the city.
Mhm.
And I remember people were so judgmental about it. They were like, "How can you raise a child in New York City?" And it's like, what do you mean? New York City is a great place to raise a child. There's tons of culture and things to do, and it's relatively safe. And something that people don't know is that New York City is actually the safest place in the entire country to raise a child because your child is never in a car. And that's the number one cause of death of children under 18. So th- there's no cars. You're on the subway, you're in an
I
occasional
remember
taxi.
I remember being worried, though, that you told me about when I forget how old Ruby was. It seemed like she was maybe in 4th grade, and
Mhm.
she was taking the subway all the way from downtown where you
Mhm.
live to the Upper West Side to go to school, and you told me that when she came home, sometimes you would still be at work, and you and she had this whole system where she would phone you when she got to the corner
Mhm.
and talk to you until she got inside
Yeah.
and was upstairs safely, which I
Yeah.
thought was really
Yeah,
parents
so
have
that
these
must have been
ways.
like the end of 5th grade because she was
Mhm.
going into middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I never felt like she was threatened or anything like that. And, there's just something about city kids, like they have this kind of vibe of like, they're street smart, they can take care of
Yeah.
themselves, that kind of thing. And I thought that was the coolest thing of all. I remember a friend of mine who lived in Orange County. She had a daughter who was Ruby's age, and she came here with her daughter when her daughter was about 4 years old. And we were on the subway, and she looked at her mom and she said, "Mommy, why is that man's skin so dark?" And she had never seen an African American person because she was living in Orange County, California. And I was like so thankful that Ruby was going to public school. She had this diverse group of friends. She was on the subway every day, seeing all different types of people. And it was just normal. And I think that's really important. I think people that are kind of sheltered, or live in other parts of the country where they're not exposed to not just people, but all kinds of culture, they tend to not accept it as much. Like people are fearful of New York. They think that it's a place where there's crime and people are getting pushed into the subways all the time. And it's like there'll be one story that's, yeah, things happen. People die. I mean, it can be scary, but it only happens once in a while. You know what I mean?
Well,
And it's blown out of proportion.
I think what people don't understand is just how big a city we are. And if you come from a town of 10,000 people where, quote unquote, nothing ever happens, and then you come to the city with 8 million or however many people we are, if you were to take where they lived, 8 million people, there's going to be bad stuff happening
Right.
because that many human beings together, stuff happens. But here, we're in such a small area that you do kind of hear about it and feel it more than if you live in small town America.
Yeah.
But I think it is also what's so exciting about living here and what we're so grateful for. The idea, I know things downtown New York are getting more homogenized, but when I was in my 20s, you could walk through the Lower East Side, go to old school pickle dealers and
Mhm.
bagels and Bialys and experience that culture. A couple of blocks later, you were in Chinatown,
Mhm.
which felt like a different time and place. And then you could keep walking and be in the financial district or in the West Village with all the historic homes. And all of that is smushed together in a small area. And it's where everyone is opening up, all the immigrants are opening up things from their country. Like you were saying, your family opening up, the restaurant that served Greek yogurt for the
Mhm.
first time. You get all of that concentrated. So I think it's something I'm really grateful for about living in a city.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I'm the kind of person that I like knowing that I can get anything I want at any time of the day.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to buy ice cream at 4 AM, but if I want it, I know I can get it,
Yeah.
and that's somehow a comfort to me, you
Yeah.
know?
For some reason, that's always really reassuring to me as well. To know
Yeah.
that there's a 24-hour supermarket and drugstore on the corner is, um, I sleep a little
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. It's just it's not I mean, I guess it is convenience, but it's something more.
Well, we also had a taste of what it's
Privilege.
like not to be able to get what you want during COVID.
Yeah.
When you and I sat on Fresh Direct and these other
Oh,
services
that was a
trying
nightmare.
to get our toilet paper or our dozen eggs or whatever the heck we needed, we really experienced what I guess, along with everyone around the world, not to have access. And that was an experience which I think connected a lot of us as New Yorkers, but also made us feel, wow, everything is so super competitive here. So many people, I mean, a lot of people
It
left,
was
but
definitely worse in New York. It was definitely more competitive. I mean, it was crazy
it's
how hard
hard.
it was to get food and to get a slot on the Fresh Direct delivery website. Yeah, it
Yeah, and it was
was
hard just to go out because in those early days, we didn't know how the virus was spread. And I remember going out with my family. We were all in those big, super heavy duty N95 masks. And one of my sons, we were at a park on the water by the river. One of my sons put his hands on the railing and like leaned over to look. And I'm like, don't touch the railing. You're going to get COVID because there were so many people
well, we didn't
close
know. We
together.
were guinea pigs. New
Yeah.
Yorkers were guinea pigs. It happened so suddenly. I remember, and this is sort of a bucket list thing. I had never seen 2 Broadway shows in one day. I know a lot of people do it, but I had never done it. It was a Wednesday, I went to a matinee, I went to Sardi's with my friend Eddie, and then we went to an evening performance. The next day, Broadway shut down.
Yeah.
The next day. And that was it. And by Friday, it was like shelter in place.
The last dinner that I ate out was with you at a
Oh, really?
Vietnamese place off of Union Square. And I remember
Oh,
we sat
yeah.
down and we looked around and we said, the waiters are wearing gloves. The waiters are wearing masks. Should we not be here? And I was already, you know me, I'm
Yeah.
neurotic about that. And I already
Yeah.
had a full cabinet of hand sanitizer and masks and all kinds of disinfecting things. And I was really thinking, this is getting this is getting scary. And that was the last time I was out in public for, an enclosed space for I don't know how
Yeah.
long.
And then everyone just left New York. Like, it's so funny because with 9/11 and with COVID, it made me want to stay more. I don't know what kind of weird instinct that is, but I was like, "This is my town. I'm not just leaving because of I mean, I knew COVID would probably eventually subside
Where would
and
we go?
right, like, what like but it all of a sudden, it felt weird to be here.
It was, and the apartment building I was living in at that time, people were moving out without taking their stuff. When I would go out to take a walk, there would just be personal effects and furniture sitting by the curb
Wow.
to, hope that a garbage truck would pick it up. And the building told me people are just leaving. Young people who have families outside of the city, people didn't want to be in this COVID
Yeah.
incubator that we were in. And they were just taking the clothes on their back, grabbing their toothbrush, and leaving, never to return.
So fascinating. Yeah, I was here with Ruby. It was just the two of us, and nobody else was in the building. It was very eerie.
Remember, we sat
The
on
whole
the
city was
roof.
eerie.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember? We kinda had this, I don't know, this schedule where, we did everything the same every day. We had certain times of the day to work, and then, of course, Andrew Cuomo's update. We had to listen to that, as every New Yorker did. Um, Tried to get food.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. Took TJ for a walk. Oh, and we went to the post office every day because I was still selling.
Hmm.
That's actually when my business really took
Yeah.
off because people were home and people couldn't shop anywhere else. So they all started shopping online.
Yeah.
It changed things.
It was a really scary time. And I remember when you told me about your getting COVID, which you traced to the Trader Joe's
Yep. On
before
Spring Street. That's where I got it.
Christmas. And I was so freaked out because I was like, what if my friend gets really sick? Because the news was full of people in miserable respiratory distress.
Yeah.
And it was so scary. And you had the sniffles for 24 hours,
Yeah. I had
12
like,
hours.
I barely had, I
Yeah.
mean, I had this, and it's funny, I've had COVID 3 times now. I had it once pre-vaccine, that was the time. I had it post-vaccine, and then I just had it like a couple of weeks ago. And I always have the same symptom, which is like a dry sinus only on my right side. And it never
Yeah.
turns into anything.
Yeah.
But the first time, of course, we were just like, anything like that, you took a COVID test and remember, you had to go and pay for it and wait online. It was super scary.
You and I were talking about this the other day, that the big watershed moments in New York City are COVID and then 9/11. We didn't have the Olympics. We didn't have a World's
Right.
Fair. We didn't have a big happy thing. We have major disasters. And
Yeah.
you were as close to the planes hitting as almost anyone on 9/11.
Yeah, no, I always say it was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life because of how it all went down. So, Ruby's dad, so first of all, Ruby woke up the night before 9/11 screaming, having some kind of crazy nightmare, and begging Steve not to go to work. I don't know if you know that part. She begged her dad not to go to work because he was working in Tower 2 on the 80th floor, something 78th floor. And, he thought it was sweet, like, oh, she doesn't want me to go to work. But I took her to school that morning on the Upper West Side, and I dropped her off at school. And you know how these moments stay with you forever? The moment I heard about it, and I'll never forget the woman's face. It was just a woman on the phone outside of an office building right near the subway. And she said, she was like crying, and she said, like, a plane hit the tower. And I go, oh my God, what's going on? It was Ruby's dad's second day of work. And I went to a payphone because I didn't have my cell phone
Yeah.
with me. I went to a payphone, tried to call him, no answer. It's like, okay, I'm not going to panic. I'm just going to go back downtown, get my cell phone, try to reach him. And then, again, I'll never forget this man's face. The subway was very slow heading downtown. And this guy got on the subway at like 42nd Street, and he just announced to the whole car. He said, a second plane hit the second tower. And that's the moment I super panicked
Yeah.
because I was like, okay, now we're under attack. What's going on? So I made my way downtown. They stopped all the trains at West 4th Street. I came out of West 4th Street, and right there were the two, the down 6th Avenue, the view
sure.
down 6th Avenue, there were the two towers on fire. I ran to my store as fast as I could because I had left my cell phone at the store. And I just waited. I couldn't reach anybody. I couldn't call anybody. I was in a complete panic. And finally, Ruby's dad called me, and he literally got out 10 minutes before, because Tower 2 was hit second, but it fell first.
And wasn't Steve told over the loudspeaker
Yeah.
not to leave?
It's such a crazy story. So it's his second day of work. They, they knew something was going on, but because the first tower was hit and not the second tower, they told them to stay in place. And the security guy from Morgan Stanley, and I forget his name. I should really know his name. There's been documentaries done about him. He had been there for the first bombing years
In the
before.
garage.
hmm
Yeah.
And he was just like, everyone out. I don't care what World Trade Center security is saying. Everyone out now. And he made 3,000 people who worked at Morgan Stanley start walking downstairs. And thank God, because when the plane hit, Steve was already on like the 40th floor.
Hmm.
So it hit when he was in the building, but he was already below. He would have been above.
Right.
So when that happened, he just said there were no more announcements from World Trade Center security, and everyone just got the fuck out of there
Yeah.
as quickly as they could. But he had to walk down like 80 stories. And that's why I always say it's the worst day of my life and the best day of my life, because I really thought that I was going to
Yeah.
have to tell Ruby that her dad was dead. And then I found out he was okay.
Yeah.
But that was a tough day. And I don't like to talk about it because everyone's got their story. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, I watched it on TV and it was terrible. Well, yeah, but there's always someone with a worse story, with a scarier story, people who lost people. My story is my story, but it's not the most important story. We were lucky. We were lucky. But I remember that night. That was a scary night of just like hearing the planes overhead and not
Yeah.
knowing what was happening, not knowing if there were going to be more attacks. It was so scary.
I remember that feeling as if it happened last night, and so wishing that it was a nightmare and waking up and realizing it really happened.
So, yeah, I mean, we were lucky that day. But yeah, this security guy, Rick Escorla was his name at Morgan Stanley. He died, but he saved the lives of like 3,000 people. Yeah.
Absolutely heroic.
Anyway, and then everyone started leaving, right? Everyone started leaving New York. That was it. They were scared that it was going to happen again. And I understand the fear. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. So I understand the fear, but I had this instinct to stay. Like, this is my town.
I know, and it's funny for us now being, as we age, seeing so many, I don't know about you, but so many of my friends have these retirement fantasies. They're starting to talk about moving to a beach town somewhere, living abroad, all of these things that are coming out. And when people say, well, what are you thinking? Well, first of all, I'm not thinking about retiring because you and I, work is
Yeah.
such a part of our lives. But this idea of leaving New York, where would you go? What would you do?
I think New York is a great place to retire. There's so much to do. And one of the things that I love about New York is that you don't need a plan to do something. You can just walk out your door and stuff just kind of happens to you. You start talking to someone on the street, you go into a gallery that you didn't expect to go into, stop someplace for a drink. Like, you can have a whole day of just walking around and seeing what you find. And I feel like when you're in a town where you have to drive from place to place, there's no serendipity. You get, like, even LA, like, you get in your car with a destination in mind, right? And then you go to the destination and you have dinner or a meeting or shopping or whatever you're doing, and then you go home. Whereas New York, it's like, I would say 90% of the time when I go out to do an errand, I end up doing something else. And I love that. Like, it makes me feel alive. And if I were older and maybe couldn't drive, how great would it be to like live in a doorman building where the doorman can help you with stuff and collect packages and, walk outside your door and be able to get a cup of coffee, take a taxi to a museum. That
Yeah.
seems like a great retirement plan
And
to me.
I think it's really interesting the way New York City keeps going no matter what. We're just coming out of this ridiculous heat wave that
Mhm.
everyone is dying over. Oh my God, it was 100 degrees. Well, everyone's either sitting in air conditioning, having their Aperol spritz, or they're out for 10 minutes before they melt, sitting in an outdoor cafe. And the same thing whenever it snows or there's crazy rain.
Mhm.
Sometimes the subways flood from the rain, but otherwise, I think raising my kids, there was maybe one day that school was canceled due to weather.
Mhm.
They never cancel because everyone shovels out, the city shovels the streets, and you can get where you're going.
No, New Yorkers are so resilient that way. I mean, that's kind of what I like about New Yorkers. They kind of take everything in stride because it's not an easy town to live in. Like, I'm used to it. You're
Yeah.
used to it. Like, this is how we grew up. So it feels very normal to us. But when I think about someone coming to New York for the first time and like trying to make a life here, there's so much to know. There's so much to learn. And I mean culturally, like how to be. Like it's it feels overwhelming. When I had my cafe, it was so interesting to me because all of my baristas, they were all like like recent college graduates who had the dream of coming to New York to be writers, artists, performers, musicians, whatever it was. They were all creatives. And I just loved them all. Like they all had these big dreams, and they didn't care. They were like living in like a apartment in Bushwick with four other
Mhm.
people and paying too much rent, but like they didn't care. They were just so happy to be in New York City.
Yeah.
They had such gratitude for it. And there was one employee in particular, Alex, whose dream was to be on Broadway. And he just did everything he could do with this goal in mind. And he was a great barista. And, when I closed my cafe, I kept in touch with everybody via social media. And 2 years ago, all of a sudden, I see that he's on Broadway.
No way.
Yeah. And
Oh,
I
that's
mean, we're
wonderful.
talking 8, 10 years, but he did it. And I love his persistence and his, I don't even know like why he was the one. Like, because everyone else kind of, after a couple of years, they went back to their hometowns or they moved out of the city or they got married and had kids. But he was just so persistent and he did it. And it was so inspirational to me. And I was so happy for him. He's in Hadestown. He's still in it.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. Well, I just found that this former coworker of mine, who's sort of a project manager, executive assistant, who I always knew had come to New York to study at HB Studios, acting, singing. She's the other side of 60 now and is starting to do cabaret. And she's had a sold out run.
Really?
And I went, it was my first cabaret experience as a native New Yorker, something I've never been drawn to. And it was so much fun. And it
Wow.
made me feel so good to see her name's Billy Browse, to see her, the woman I always knew, singing a little bit to herself in the
Mhm.
office, is now doing this sold out show
That's so
in
cool.
her 60s. So it's kind of like doors open at every stage of the game here
Yeah.
if people are persistent enough.
Yeah. No, it's wonderful. I mean, it really there's so much possibility here. I've always felt that, like you really can do whatever you want. And it's not easy. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's really hard. But, if you're willing to put in the work, I guess anything can happen.
Okay, but there's one thing about New York that you and I have different opinions on. How do you feel New Yorkers treat tourists? Because unfortunately, I'm the person
Oh my
muttering
God.
under my breath, like,
Yeah.
can you please get out of the flow of traffic, move over? And I just photobomb every selfie
Mhm.
known to mankind. But I feel that you have a much warmer view
I
towards
I
them.
have mixed feelings because I want people to come here and love New York. So I feel like determined to do whatever I have to do to make them love New York. Like a lot of my followers on Instagram will write to me and say like, "Oh, what are your recommendations?" And I have a whole list of, restaurants and stuff like that that I send them. But what I always say is don't stay in Times Square. Stay downtown. Stay like New York is not Times Square. I
Mhm.
think that's one of the myths about New York,
Yeah.
that it's like this big crazy place with, it's not like that. Like what I love about New York is that there are all these microcosms, like smaller communities that, like I know the name of my UPS guy, my postal guy, all my neighbors. I know the names of all the dogs. I know the guy who owns the frame shop on the corner and the guy who owns the restaurant on the corner. And people, I don't think, understand that about New
Mhm.
York, that each community is actually really small and you do feel part of your community. It's not like you're just in this big, crazy city, like alone, you know? And I love that. I felt the same way about NYU, which is a huge college, university. And people would say, "Oh, I could never go to such a big college. I went to a little, liberal arts college upstate." And I'm like, I was in the photo department. I graduated with 16 people. Literally. I am still friends with all my professors. I'm still friends with many of the students that I graduated with. And, you know, I don't know what was going on at the rest of NYU. Like, yeah, there were classes that I took when I first got there that had like hundreds of people, but that wasn't my experience. And that has never been my experience in New York City, especially downtown. There's less people downtown. There's smaller buildings. It's not as built up. And it really feels like a community to me.
Yeah, it's funny, you and I think one thing we share in common is that we both have so many of those milestones in New York City, that we were born here, we
Mhm.
went to school here,
Mhm.
we had our kids here, got married, and who knows what lies ahead, but it's all, like, sort of stamped and minted
No,
in New
and
York
and
City.
you're like the one person that I'm always terrified. You did leave once, like for a
Yeah.
little while,
Yeah, I
not
went
for
a
too
couple of
long and
miles
not too
away.
far.
Yeah.
But I'm always terrified, like, that you're gonna leave because I take it very personally, you know what I mean? When people leave.
I'm
I'm
not
like,
going
"What? Why would you
anywhere.
wanna leave? This is the greatest city in the world."
I'm worried that you're going to start living part of the year in Lisbon or Madrid. So that's I will confess my
Well, I have been thinking
concern.
about it, but part of the year is not a move. You know what
Okay.
I mean? I would never move. Like, this needs to be my home base.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would like to spend some more time in Madrid or Lisbon. My
Okay.
daughter, my dad, they're both there. So,
Just pass me your schedule for approval.
well,
Make sure it's
also, my
okay.
friend Bart, who used to live next door and moved up to Connecticut with his husband, he just moved to Madrid. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, "What do you mean you moved to Madrid?" He's like, "We came here, we loved it. We were sick of living in like, I don't know, some little town in Litchfield County,
Mhm.
Connecticut." And they literally just like grabbed their cats, picked up, found an apartment and moved to Madrid. And all of a sudden I'm starting to think like, should I do that? Like not permanently, but
Okay.
should I be spending more time in Madrid? You know? And now, since I don't have to go to California as often because I had this long distance relationship with my last husband, I want to go in that direction and I want to spend more
Yeah.
time in Europe. So it's a possibility,
Okay,
but
just
I'm
make sure
not
you have a
leaving.
guest room.
No, I
If you have
will
a
die
guest room,
here.
I'll
I
come
will die in
visit.
this loft. You know
Yeah.
that. You know that about me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So, one of the things that Carrie says in Sex and the City that I've always loved is, I'm paraphrasing, but the quote is, "That's the thing about New York. You never know what's around the corner." And I think to me, that's the thing that I love the most about New York, just the best type of uncertainty that you just don't know what's going to happen and the possibility of anything happening. And I think about that all the time when I leave the house. It's always like, oh, what's going to happen today? And sometimes it can be a minefield of like avoiding things because you know what it's like. And you get on a subway car and there's someone who's acting strangely and you're like, okay, I got to get out of here. But most of the time, it's great interactions with people, it's discovering something new. I feel very alive in New York. I don't know that I would feel that way anywhere else. There's so much stimulation and so much energy. People always talk about the energy of New York, that I mean, it's kind of a dopamine hit. Like once you have that, I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Once you're used to that, that's such a great point because everyone talks about scrolling on social media
Mhm.
is that shock of the new and the dopamine hit of getting your brain going. And that is what it's like when you walk out here. People are wearing crazy things.
Mhm.
They're doing crazy things. They're saying crazy things. And much as we say that we hate change, of course, everything new, we want to know all about it. Why
Experience
didn't I
it.
hear
Yeah.
about this? And I need to go immediately. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who's like a stimulation junkie, it it's the perfect place because there's so much to do and so much to see. And it's really something that's in my bones. It's in my DNA. Another quote from Sex and the City is when Carrie says, New York is my boyfriend. It's a great place to be single because
Mhm.
you never feel alone.
Mhm.
And that's how I feel. Like I have this love affair with New York and it only gets stronger. My love for New York only gets stronger. A lot of people, I think, get tired of it. It becomes a drag. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. But for me, it's just, I love it more and more. Well, thank you all for listening to Golden. And Janet, thank you so much for being here. It was
Thank you
really
for
great to
having
talk to
me.
you. I love that you're a native New Yorker. It's so cool to be able to talk about these things that we experience, but on a very different level. All right. Well, I hope you listen to our next episode. And I'm Elisa signing off. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can go to chelseagirl.nyc or Tales from the Junk Pile. And Janet, where can people connect with you?
I am at 1111 Edit on Instagram, and that's where you can buy a token charm if you want.
Please subscribe and share with a friend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.